The laughter was quiet. That was the part that hurt. It wasn't loud or boastful, it was casual. The kind of laughter shared between men who believed they were winning. It was spoken in Mandarin, confident, casual, cruel. Why does America keep sending servants to negotiate power? The man at the head of the table didn't lower his voice. He didn't need to. They were certain she wouldn't understand. A few executives smiled. One laughed softly. Another nodded in agreement. The interpreter stayed neutral, professional, detached, paid to translate words but not truth. The contracts on the table were worth $1.9 billion. Factories, jobs, futures. 3,000 American workers depended on this deal, and in that moment, they had already decided she didn't belong. Nia Caldwell didn't react, she didn't blink, she didn't lift her head. She wrote one word in her notes, just one, and waited because she understood every word, every insult, every assumption, every piece of contempt disguised as casual conversation. And in less than an hour, the room laughing at her would fall silent. Nia Caldwell learned early that success was not about brilliance. It was about restraint. She spoke last in meetings. She smiled often. She let others take credit for ideas. She planted. Her mother cleaned office buildings for 30 years, 3 jobs, no breaks, no complaints. Her grandmother scrubbed kitchens she was not allowed to eat in. She polished silverware she couldn't afford. She raised children in houses that would never be hers. Nia grew up watching intelligence go unseen because it wore black skin. She saw her mother solve problems that white managers couldn't. Watched her grandmother calculate budgets in her head faster than accountants with degrees, but none of it mattered because brilliance in black women was invisible, or worse, it was threatening. So Nia learned the rules, the unspoken ones, the ones that kept you employed but never promoted. Be useful, not threatening. Be sharp, not scary. Be present, not prominent. Smile when they take credit, nod when they interrupt. Speak softer than you think, laugh louder than you want it. Worked by 42. She was chief strategy officer at Arkway Dynamics, a Fortune 500 manufacturing conglomerate. She had saved 4 major deals in 3 years. She had restructured operations that executives said couldn't be fixed. She had negotiated contracts that competitors said were impossible, but she was never in the photographs, never quoted in the press releases, never invited to the dinners where real decisions were made. 3 days before the biggest deal in company history, the CEO collapsed. Stroke, hospital silence. The board panicked. The stock dropped 6% in one afternoon. Investors demanded answers. The media circled. They needed stability. They needed the deal to survive. So they named Nia interim CEO, not because she looked the part, but because she had saved deals before, quietly, efficiently, without applause, without ego, without making white men feel replaceable. The board told themselves it was temporary, just until Gerald recovered, just until the deal closed, just until things stabilized. The foreign partners told themselves it was symbolic, an American diversity move, a public relations strategy. Nothing that mattered. The men across the table told themselves she was a servant pretending to lead, and that made it easier, because servants don't negotiate. They accept. The Hanwei delegation arrived relaxed too. Relaxed, they entered the conference room like they owned it. Expensive suits, expensive watches, expensive certainty. They joked freely in Mandarin about American weakness, about black leadership, about how easy this deal would be. One executive made a comment about affirmative action. Another laughed about inexperience. A third suggested they could reduce the offer by 20%, and no one would push back because she wouldn't understand the strategy. She wouldn't see the trap. She wouldn't know enough to fight. Nia listen, she recorded every insult, every assumption, every lie hidden in polite language, every smile that meant something else. What they didn't know was how she learned Mandarin, not in a classroom, not in a university program, not in a corporate training session, in a laundromat from her grandmother. Woman who cleaned for a Chinese-owned family in the 70s, a family who owned 3 dry cleaning businesses in Los Angeles. Her grandmother worked 14-hour days, pressing clothes, sorting laundry, scrubbing stains from fabrics that cost more than her monthly rent. The family spoke Mandarin at home. They thought she couldn't understand, so they spoke freely about prices, about customers, about her. They called her lazy when she took a bathroom break. They called her slow when she asked for clarification. They docked her pay when their own son made mistakes, but she learned their language anyway, not to please them, not to prove anything, but because knowledge was power, even if that power had to stay hidden. Grammar whispered over folded clothes, vocabulary learned in silence, tones practiced in the early morning before anyone arrived. She taught Nia everything, not just the language, but the lesson beneath it. Listen when they think you can't learn what they think you want. Remember what they believe you'll forget. Nia had been trained to listen, to see patterns in numbers, to hear lies in presentations, to catch contradictions in contracts, and now she heard something dangerous. They planned to change the deal after signing shift. Profits offshore close American plants within 18 months trip. Assets sell the intellectual property to a shell company in Singapore, and someone inside Arkway was helping them. That man was Evan Brooks, Senior Vice President of Operations, the executive who wanted her job, the man who smiled in meetings and sent files behind her. Back he had recommended this partnership. He had vouched for Hanwei's credibility. He had promised the board it was safe, and now Nia knew why he was getting a $5 million consulting contract once the deal closed a seat on Han Wei's advisory board and her job once Arkway collapsed by the end of the day. Nia knew two things. The deal was a trap designed to destroy the company, and they planned to destroy her before it closed * over the next 3 days. Nia played the role they expected, agreeable, grateful, and certain. She asked simple questions. She deferred to Evan's expertise. She smiled when they made jokes she wasn't supposed to understand, but behind the scenes, she was building a case. She had her assistant pull every email between Evan and Hanwei for the past 2 years. She hired a forensic accountant to trace shell companies in the contract. She contacted a lawyer she trusted, a black woman named Simone Harper, who had taken on corporations twice Arkway's size, and she reached out to someone inside Hanwei, a junior analyst who had been overlooked, a woman named Lin Chun, who spoke perfect English and was tired of watching corruption rewarded. Lin Chun had seen the same dismissiveness Nia had. She had been passed over for promotions. She had been excluded from meetings. She had been told to smile more and speak less, so when Nia reached out with evidence of fraud, Lin Chun didn't hesitate. She sent files internal memos, recorded calls, messages that confirmed everything. The plan wasn't just to cheat Arkway, it was to create a pattern by American companies, hollow them out, resell the pieces, and blame the black woman CEO when everything collapsed. They had done it twice before in Detroit and Pittsburgh. Each time a woman of color had been installed as interim CEO. Each time the company failed within a year. Each time the narrative was the same: incompetence, poor leadership, affirmative action gone wrong. And each time the men behind the fraud walked away richer. This time would be different. Nia just needed them to think they were winning. They framed her 12 hours before signing it. Was elegant in its cruelty. Fake accounts opened in her name, forged wire transfers to offshore banks, emails she never sent, messages that looked damning without context. Evan Brooks walked into the emergency board meeting with printed evidence. His voice was grave, concerned, reluctant. I hate to bring this forward, but we have a fiduciary responsibility. The board suspended her without debate. No investigation, no questions, no phone call, just a security escort. They walked her out past people she had trained, past people who had thanked her last week, past people who suddenly avoided eye contact. History repeating itself, cleaner paperwork, same outcome. Her grandmother was walked out of jobs twice, once for asking about unpaid overtime, once for reporting harassment. Both times the reason given was theft, money missing from a drawer, supplies unaccounted for, accusations without evidence. But evidence wasn't the point. The point was removal. Nia sat in her car in the parking garage, hands shaking, the same garage where she used to arrive at 5:30 in the morning, the same garage where she worked weekends while others golfed, the same garage where she had believed hard work mattered. Then her phone buzzed, a message from a blocked number. You are not wrong. You are just early. Boardroom, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bring everything. She looked at the screen for a long time. Then she opened her trunk and pulled out 3 file boxes. As everything she had built. Everything. They thought she didn't have everything. They didn't think she was smart enough to gather. She drove to Simone Harper's office and didn't leave until 4 in the morning. The next morning, the boardroom was full, pens ready, contracts printed, smiles, rehearsed, champagne on ice. Even Brooks sat confidently at the head of the table, the seat that should have been. Naiz, the chairman of Hanwei, sat beside him, relaxed, certain already. Counting his money, the board members looked uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to stop anything. They wanted this over. They wanted the headlines. They wanted to move on. The chairman laughed again in Mandarin, a joke about servants knowing their place, about American companies selling themselves, about how easy this was. Then the doors opened. Nia walked in, not escorted, not announced, just walked in with Simone Harper beside her and a federal investigator behind them. The room froze. Evan Brooks went pale. The Hanwei executives exchanged glances. The board members looked confused. Nia didn't shout. She didn't rush. She didn't perform. She simply walked to the head of the table, placed 3 folders in front of the board and began. For the past 6 months, Arkway has been targeted by a coordinated fraud scheme. The scheme involves executives at Hanway and one executive inside this company. She opened the first folder. Bank statements, wire transfers, shell companies traced back to Evan Brooks. These accounts were opened using my credentials, but the IP address is traced to Evan's home office. The signatures are forged. The transactions never happened. She opened the second folder, emails between Evan and Hanway executives, messages outlining the plan to strip Arkway's assets, conversations about closing American factories, plans to offshore everything within 18 months. These communications confirm intent. Intent to defraud, intent to destroy, intent to blame me when everything collapsed. The chairman of Hanway dismissed Heron Mandarin, his voice sharp, angry. This is theater. She's desperate. She has no proof. That was when she lifted her head and answered him in his father's dialect, perfect Northern Mandarin, the formal register used in business, the kind that takes years to master. I have every proof. I have your messages. I have your shell companies. I have testimony from your own employees. The room went silent, not the silence of respect, the silence of shock. She continued in Mandarin, translating each insult he had made over the past 3 days. You called me a servant on Monday. You said black women were easy to manipulate on Tuesday. Yesterday you laughed about affirmative action. Then she switched to English so everyone in the room could hear. You plan to close 3 factories, lay off 2,800 workers, and sell our patents to a company you own in Shanghai. She opened the third folder, federal subpoenas, fraud investigations, wiretap authorizations. The FBI has been monitoring your communications for 6 weeks. They have recordings, they have transactions, they have everything. The federal investigator stepped forward. Hanway executives are currently being detained. Mr. Brooks, you're under arrest. The board sat in stunned silence. Evan Brooks tried to stand, security blocked him. The Hanway executives tried to leave, federal agents were already at the door. Nia closed the folder, looked directly at the chairman, and said in Mandarin, You underestimated me because of my skin. You believed I was weak because I am a woman. You thought I was stupid because I smiled. Then, in English, no deal. Take your racism with you. Asterisk. Evan Brooks was arrested before lunch fraud, wire fraud conspiracy. The deal called Sadarke stock dipped 7%, then surged 22% because investors realized they had avoided a catastrophe. Investigations opened across 3 countries, Singapore, China, United States. 8 Hanway executives were indicted. Evan Brooks took a plea deal and received 12 years. The board held an emergency meeting this time. They asked Nia to attend, not as interim CEO, as permanent CEO. They offered her the position, with an apology, with a contract, with equity, with everything they should have offered from the beginning. Nia negotiated. She wanted 3 things. First, an independent review of every executive hire in the past decade. Second, a binding commitment to workplace equity, not diversity training, not symbolic gestures, but measurable change. Third, a foundation in her grandmother's name to support women of color in corporate leadership. The board agreed to everything, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. Within 6 months, Arkway signed 3 new partnerships, all with better terms, all with transparent contracts, all with companies that respected her. The press called her a hero. Forbes put her on the cover. Harvard Business School taught a case study about her strategy, but Nia knew the truth. She wasn't extraordinary. She was just the first one who survived. Asterisk. Power does not fear loud people. It fears prepared ones, people who listen when others think no one is listening, people who document when others think no one is watching, people who carry generations of silence and know exactly when to break it. Nia did not win because she spoke Mandarin. She won because her grandmother refused to stop learning, because her mother refused to stop working, because generations of black women refused to disappear. That is what they never expect. The children of the invisible are always listening, always learning, always preparing, and one day they answer not with anger, not with violence, not with the weapons used against them, but with patience, with strategy, with the quiet accumulation of knowledge that is the power they fear most. The power of someone who knows more than they're supposed to, who sees more than they should, who remembers everything they thought would be forgotten. Nia's grandmother never got an apology. She never got promoted. She never got her name on anything, but she got something more important. She got to see her granddaughter walk into rooms that would have turned her away. She got to see her granddaughter speak languages They said she wasn't smart enough to learn she got to see her granddaughter survive in spaces designed to destroy her, and that was power, not the power they write about in business journals, not the power they teach in MBA programs, but the power that survives, the power that endures, the power that builds across generations. One lesson at a time, one word at a time, one grandmother teaching one granddaughter that the system is designed to break you, but you don't have to break asterisk 3 years later. Nia stood in front of 500 young women, most of them black, most of them first-generation college students, most of them told they didn't belong. She was giving the keynote at the inaugural summit of the Caldwell Foundation, named after her grandmother Ruth Caldwell, who cleaned offices for 30 years, who learned languages in laundromats, who taught her granddaughter that invisible doesn't mean powerless. Nia didn't give them a motivational speech. She didn't tell them to lean in. She didn't tell them to work twice as hard. She told them the truth. They will underestimate you. Let them. They will dismiss you. Document everything. They will try to make you small. Stay strategic, because the goal is not to prove you belong. The goal is to change who gets to decide. She told them about her grandmother, about the laundromat, about the whispered lessons, about the quiet accumulation of knowledge. She couldn't change her circumstances, but she changed mine. And now we change yours. The foundation offered scholarships, mentorship programs, legal support for women facing workplace discrimination, and something else, something her grandmother would have appreciated: Mandarin classes. Not just the language, but the history, the context, the power of understanding what others think you can't, because knowledge is power, even when that power must stay hidden, even when that power takes decades to reveal, even when that power looks like a grandmother folding laundry teaching her granddaughter words that would one day save thousands of jobs. Asterisk. This is not a story about one woman. This is a story about millions. The women who cleaned buildings and raised children, the women who were told to smile and stay quiet, the women who learned languages in secret, who saved money in envelopes, who worked 3 jobs with no breaks, who died without recognition, who never got their names on anything, but who passed something forward anyway: a lesson, a language, a refusal to accept invisibility. Nia Caldwell is not exceptional. She is the result of generations of exceptional women who were never allowed to be seen as such, and that is the point. The system is designed to make you think you're alone, that your struggle is unique, that your intelligence is an anomaly, but you are not alone. You are the continuation of something powerful, something that survives boardrooms and laundromats, something that survives discrimination and dismissal, something that survives because it refuses to disappear. So when they laugh, listen. When they underestimate, prepare. When they think you don't understand, remember everything, because the children of the invisible are always listening, and one day, when the moment is right, when the evidence is gathered, when the truth cannot be denied, you answer not with their weapons, but with yours, knowledge, patience, strategy, and the quiet power of generations who refuse to be erased. That is how you win, not loudly, not quickly, but completely.